Welcome to the High Latitude Challenge Part 2. In Part 1, we sailed the route starting from Cherbourg in western France, south to the Canary Islands, Cape Verde Islands, then across to Brazil. We followed the east coast of South America to Rio de Janeiro. From there we sailed on to Mar del Plata in Argentina and continued south all the way to the Beagle Channel and Ushuaia. That was the place where all boats preparing to sail across the Drake Passage to Antarctica make their latest preparations before sailing across the Beagle Channel to Puerto Williams, which is in Chile, because the Chilean authorities administer that northern part of the Antarctic Peninsula and also the waters around Cape Horn. From there we sailed across the Drake Passage to Antarctica, spent some time there, made then the return voyage across the Drake Passage back to the Beagle Channel, and ended that first part of the High Latitude Challenge in Ushuaia. And that's where we start again today. From Ushuaia we will be sailing north through southern Chile, across and along what I could not describe better than the magic 1,000 miles. This area of southern Chile has been described as the Chilean canals, which is wrong because there are not many canals there. It has also been described as the Chilean fjordland, but it is not really a fjordland because the route sails past a large number of very small islands, inlets, through sheltered waters for a distance of 1,000 miles. And it is one of the most spectacular areas in the world to be sailing on your own boat. The scenery changes all the time. There's fantastic wildlife, and the weather in probably going to be February or possibly March, when we'll be sailing that route with the High Latitude Challenge, would be all right. The winds will be mostly on the beam, but some of them will be quite close called. But as we are going to be all this distance of over 1,000 miles in sheltered waters, the wind itself shouldn't make much of a difference. We're sailing through very sheltered waters, as I pointed out, as I did myself on Aventura 3, across beautiful areas, looking into the Andes. We encounter very much wildlife because this is a totally uninhabited area, or spectacular anchorages like this one at the foot of the Romance Glacier in southern Chile. Yet another glacier tumbling down into the sea, and we'll continue for 600 miles along this spectacular area all the way to Puerto Eden. Puerto Eden is a small fishing harbor and the first settlement north of Ushuaia for 600 miles, because that area is totally uninhabited, and on our own passage through that area we only encountered 2 fishing vessels and 2 sailing yachts. It's an area which is fantastic for, as I described earlier, for visiting on your own yacht. From Puerto Eden, the route continues north. This area and the scenery remains as spectacular as before. But as we're going to make this passage probably in March or maybe even April, as late as April, there will be some local storms known as willy woes. It's a sort of a katabatic wind that rolls off the Andes and can be quite violent. We encountered one with winds of force 8, even 9, with 50 knots of wind like this one. However, the area is all very well sheltered, and we didn't have any problems in spite of the very strong winds. Yet another one is approaching Aventura 3 here. I was making our way north, all the way to Puerto Montt. Puerto Montt is at the top end of what I described as the magic 1,000 miles. It's a fishing harbor with very good facilities, several marinas and very good repair facilities. It will be a good place to prepare the boat for the long passage to Easter Island, The winds, as you can see from this windgram, are variable. They could be quite strong, some force 5, even force 6. Most of them would be on the beam or even running, but possibly on some occasions we will also encounter winds from ahead and we might have to start tacking. But anyway, it's a good time to make that passage. And as you can also see from this pilot charts, the eastern part of the South Pacific is free of tropical storms. The area which is highlighted in red shows the critical area of South Pacific cyclones in the western part of the South Pacific, but as I said, the eastern part is quite safe and has never been visited, as far as known, by tropical storms. The anchorage in Easter Island off its north coast is quite well protected. As you can see here, we arrived there with the Millennium Odyssey in 1999. It was the first rally not only to have visited Antarctica but also Easter Island. Some of our boats, some of the 7 boats, were anchored here of the spectacular statues for which the Easter Island is world famous. You can see another typical statue on its west coast, and then yet again good anchorage. 5 of the 7 boats that took part in the Millennium Odyssey southern route anchored here, and this is also the place where the boats in the High Latitude Challenge will probably find shelter. The interior of Easter Island is famous for its statues. They were all carved out of the rock of this crater, the crater of the volcano Rano Raraku, and most of the statues have been re-erected in the recent years. Some of them you can be seen here, and strangely enough, for no known reason, they never face out to sea but inland. From Easter Island, the route continues north towards Hawaii. The winds, as you can see here, are very favorable. They are mostly by now the southeasterly trade winds that will stay with us all the way to the equator. But before we reach the North Pacific and the prevailing northeasterly trade winds, it's a very good idea to try to make some easting while still in south of the equator, so as to have a better sailing angle once the equator is crossed. As far as tropical storms are concerned, by May, when this passage is going to be undertaken, you can see again highlighted in red, in the eastern part of the North Pacific are the hurricanes that prevail off the coast of Mexico and Central America, and on the west side, the typhoons of East Asia. By May, the area that will be sailing through from Easter Island north to Hawaii should be clear of tropical storms, and that is also the case in the month of June. This is a chart of the month of June. You see the extent of the hurricanes is somewhat larger, and they are occasionally in June, they also reach as far as Hawaii, and this is why this has to be borne in mind when we sail north from Easter Island to Hawaii, that this critical area is ideally passed still in the month of May or possibly in early June. The landfall in Hawaii will be Honolulu. It has excellent facilities for visiting boats, visiting sailing boats, several marinas, very good repair facilities, and it will be a perfect place to prepare the boat for the Northwest Passage, because as we reach the start of the transit of the Northwest Passage in Dutch Harbor, that is a very well endowed fishing harbor, but not good facilities for visiting yachts, visiting sailing boats. And this is why Honolulu will be such an essential stopover place to prepare the boat for the continuation of the voyage. The winds from Hawaii to Dutch Harbor, as you can see, will be either westerlies or easterlies. The easterlies are the northeasterly trade winds of the North Pacific, but generally speaking, as you can see, they are mostly from a favorable direction. We have left by now, ideally, the tropical storms behind, with the hurricanes of the eastern North Pacific and the typhoons of the western North Pacific virtually joining up by the month of July and August, but by this time we should be well on our way to Dutch Harbor and the start of the leg of the transit of the Northwest Passage. Dutch Harbor is a very busy fishing harbor, good facilities for fishing boats, but not much for visiting yachts. The voyage continues from there north through the Bering Strait, and I'm showing this slide here because in blue you can see the route that Aventura 4 sailed through the Bering Strait from Dutch Harbor all the way to the transit of the Northwest Passage going east. And also you can see in yellow the extent of the polar ice cap, which indeed it shows how it has been reduced over the last 50 years. You can see still the ice cap of Greenland on the right hand side, but as a result of climate change, much of the polar ice has gone by summer, which is when this satellite photo was taken, and shows also the route of Aventura through the Northwest Passage. From Dutch Harbor through the Bering Strait to Barrow at the northwestern point of Alaska, the winds will be from all over the place. You can see mostly running, reaching, but also some close hold. However, it's still fairly, being the Bering Strait is quite sheltered, and I included here a photograph from my chart plotter. You can see here the Bering Strait, and on the left hand side is Siberia and Russia, on the right hand side is Alaska, USA. It's a fantastic place to sail through on your own boat. We were also very fortunate because we had a very strong current, over 4 knots, so we're doing over 9 knots over the ground, sailing north and then arriving at Barrow and turning east for the Northwest Passage proper. By now we have crossed the Arctic Circle and we are well on our way for the transit of the Northwest Passage. We were fairly early in the season when we did our own transit, so there was still some ice, and the advantage of attempting to do the transit of the Northwest Passage from west to east, from the Pacific to the Atlantic, is that in summer the ice retreats from west to east. It means that you have a much better chance of finding good conditions for the transit in July and August than boats starting from the Atlantic from the east. There was still quite a lot of ice, as you can see from this radar shot, but it was quite easily avoided, and also the days are very long, and we were quite careful not to come into contact with too much ice. Sometimes when we reached east, we were now close to Bellot Straits. There was still a lot of ice. Occasionally it was quite difficult to pass, but we always waited for the better conditions. And we reached now Bellot Straits, and we're sailing into Bellot Straits. Bellot Strait is a very important point to reach for a transit of the Northwest Passage because it separates the North American continent from the Arctic archipelago, and when the Bellot Strait is open and is free of ice, as it was in our case, it means that the rest of the passage should also be free of ice, and you can also know that if you have once passed successfully and safely through Bellot Strait, you will be able to complete a transit of the Northwest Passage. Here is Aventura close to the end. We're sailing east, and to Nuuk, the capital of Greenland. Again, like in Dutch Harbor, Nuuk is a very busy fishing harbor. Facilities for visiting boats, visiting yachts are quite poor, but you're always welcome to tie up alongside one of the local fishing boats. And having reached that point, we can now see we are back in the Atlantic. We'll be sailing south from Nuuk to Newfoundland. In my own case, we stopped in St. John's, but we have now been invited to use the facilities of the Royal Newfoundland Yacht Club in Long Pond because St. John's is a very busy commercial harbor visited by cruise ships, so we're very fortunate to be invited to spend our time while in Newfoundland in Conception Bay, which is the site of the Royal Newfoundland Yacht Club, which you can see on the left-hand side at the top. On the right-hand side is the small marina where we hope the boats taking part in the High Latitude Challenge will be docked for their stay in Newfoundland. And from there's only one more leg to sail all the way to Cherbourg to the start. The winds are mostly from the west and northwest, probably quite strong, as by now it is September, but I sailed that same route in September and the winds were alright, although occasionally quite strong. And here we are, arriving safely in Cherbourg at the point where the event started 1 year previously. And there's only one point to add here, that the boats that started from the US East Coast and joined the initial start from Cherbourg will have sailed from Newport to Cherbourg with this kind of winds, and now to show them on their way home, they will have stopped. They don't continue to Cherbourg, but from Long Pond in Newfoundland, these are the kind of winds they'll encounter on their way home. They're indeed not very good, they're mostly from ahead, but the route on the east coast of Canada and then coming down to the east coast of the United States has very many sheltered places, so this homeward passage can be broken up in several individual legs. I'm showing here a summary which will also be posted to every participant to give you an idea of the weather and the timing of the various legs, all the way from the start, whether from Newport, from the US East Coast, or from the main start in Cherbourg, and all the way back to Cherbourg. Having successfully completed the first edition of the High Latitude Challenge, by 2027 we will open up the challenge also for participants who would like to join this special event, whether they are based in Australia, New Zealand, China, Hong Kong or Japan. They will be able, and we will be sending the information eventually to those who are interested, to join the event in Honolulu, as we have done so with the first edition of the High Latitude Challenge. And on their return from Antarctica through the South Pacific and the North Pacific, they will be able to return home from Honolulu. But those details will be sent out to those who are interested later on. For the moment, anyone who is interested in joining the High Latitude Challenge, the first edition, should send an email to info@cornellsailing.com with challenge as a subject. Goodbye.